There's a lot of videos on this topic, so I figured I'd make one too. It's going to be basically soldering one of these XT connectors. I buy them by the bag. XT90s, XT60s, XT30s, whatever. It's all the same process for the most part. All we're going to do is just simply, solder on these wires onto the appropriate positive, negative, and that's it. And then cover it. You can either have two options to cover, either with one of these devices that just press fits on. When you buy your connectors, they'll tell you if they will use this kind of cover, or you'll buy them with these. Or you can buy these separate. I buy these quite a bit just to cover that up, and then you hit it with a heat gun and it shrinks up nice and pretty. Couple things. One is, you could try to use something like this. Your cheapo $10 soldering iron. I've tried in the past to do it, and it just can't get hot enough. So I resorted to something a little more beefy, a Tiswall. This is one I got off Amazon. I'm sure there's better out there. There's some magnificent ones. But this one, according to the dial, I'm at about 700 degrees Celsius on this when I'm soldering. And I'm also got a very nice, more of a flat tip. Sometimes you can go with bigger options. If I'm doing circuit boards, I'm using this little fine tip. Anyway, doesn't matter. I mean, you can go different tips, but this is the one I've been using, and it seems to work well for me. All right. The other thing, here's the solder I use, rosin core. It's got flux in it, and it is a 60-40 mix. Works well for me. Let me fix my camera. It's all over the place. I've got an assortment of vices here to hold things in place while I'm soldering. I also have a fan because the fumes that come off of that, you don't want to breathe them in. Might as well disperse them throughout your house so everybody else breathes them in. And it just, for me, I've had lead poisoning before. It's kind of a bummer. And I use this. I use this Flux pen. Makes it easier. You don't have to use it. I like it. Let me also say, I'm not an expert at soldering. I'm not a pro. I've soldered some stuff, and a buddy of mine asked me to solder something. I soldered it real quick. It wasn't a big deal. And that's where I like to be at that point where I can do something like this, and it's not a big deal. So I'm just going to take you along the ride of what I go through to solder 12 gauge wires to an XT60 connector. Just in case you buy a plane and you got to swap it out, swap out the ESCs or something like that. It's an easy process. The other tool I need, you can strip the wires a couple different ways. I like to strip the wires by just putting my razor down on it, rolling it back and forth a little, and voila. Usually twist that. Again, I'm not a pro. This is just how I've been doing it. I'm sure there's a lot of other ways to do it. When this gets inserted into here, and the 12 gauge doesn't fit in there really super clean, so it's not going to be perfect. 12 gauge fits into 90 XT90s really well. But anyway, that's what we're going to end up with, something like that. But the first thing I need to do is get my soldering iron turned on. First thing I'm going to do is get some solder on the tips of these wires. And hopefully you'll be able to see that. I have my soldering iron set for about maybe 730. Go through that process for you. While we're waiting for it to heat up, probably should have done that a little sooner. So what we're going to do is we're going to put coat solder on all the ends and put a little bit in here. Also going to use my little Flux pen to put a little flux there. It just helps with getting the solder to adhere. Or I don't know what the term is, but that's what I do. I use that. And I'll also use another plug, the opposite plug, as a heat sink. So not as much heat is going into the plastic. Some of it is going into this other plug and into that additional material. Anyway, all right, so here we go. Hopefully I can see this. It's hard to do it when I'm not right in front of it, but I'm going to heat up that wire and start feeding in. Start feeding in my solder. Let it bake in there for a little bit. Hit it from all ends. I like to clean up my solder tip. The other thing I do also, I put down this mat. So if I were to drop something, it's not, if I were to drop some solder, it doesn't mess up my regular mat. I don't know if you can see it, this mat here. So this is a silicone mat. If you can see, I've got pretty good solder all the way around it. And that's going to be key for when I attach it to this. I'm going to do the next one. It's kind of hard for me to see it. I usually get my face right into it. Oh, and the other important part, turn my fan on so I don't kill myself. All right. Yeah, I never filmed this process. But get some solder on the tip of your soldering iron first. It helps with getting the heat throughout, or transfer that heat a little bit better. And then clean the tip all the time. Let's see how we did. Looks pretty good. There's a blob on there. Could soak in a little bit better, but we'll see what we do next. On these plugs, it will say negative and positive. Negative is black, positive is red. So just remember that. So we're going to go through, we're going to put the negative up first. That's the black wire. First, what I'm going to do, though, is get a little solder in here. Just stick my tip there and shove in some solder. And I'm having a hard time seeing it from this distance, but you get the picture. Then, it's as simple as heating this up, putting my wire that's already been pre-tinned, pre-coated, and it'll start bubbling. And I'll wiggle it a little bit, and you'll notice it'll all of a sudden heat up and kind of flatten out. You'll be able to tell as it gets all glistening. It kind of pushes into the hole, into the slot. Doesn't look overly perfect. Undo that, and it's okay. Let's do the same thing to the red. Get our soldering iron. Get a little solder in there. Clean that off. Put a dab on there. The wire there, over, and heat that up. Might take a little bit for it to get going, but then you'll notice it kind of sits down into that plug and gets a nice shiny coat. Little blobs on there. Got a little too much. Normally, I'm further away than I normally would, but I would be okay with this. It's not the prettiest, a little too much solder. It's not going to go anywhere. Now you have one of two options. You can either use this, and here's the tricky part. If this was connected to the ESC already, you'd have to put in these, either shrink wrap or this, prior to any soldering. Otherwise, it's kind of like, I don't know, putting your shoes on and then realizing you forgot to put the socks on. You're going to have to undo it all. So this right here just clips over. If you need to put on the shrink wrap or that cover before you solder, don't get it close to where you're soldering. It'll melt on the wire. There we go. Clips in. You hear it had a little audible click. And there you go. Otherwise, you're going to slide these on and then use a heat gun and heat that up. If this is already in your model, these are a lot easier to deal with. I use these sometimes. I prefer shrink wrap. You could do both, but you run into some problems when you do that. Anyway, this is the process I use to basically solder XT60 or 90 or whatever connectors. Thanks for watching.